Hilchas Rotzeach Shmiras Nefesh Perik Chi. So the Rambam, the first four prakim of Hilchas Rotzeach, discuss the dinim of someone that was a Rotzeach b'mezid, or the prati dinim of a Rotzeach b'mezid being chayiv misa. Then in the next four prakim, the Rambam discussed the dinim of a Rotzeach b'shegig. The Rotzeach b'shegig is chayiv golus, all the dinim of what's called a shegig, and how we killed him, derech nefila as opposed to derech aliyah, and the dinim of Ori Miklat, and kama pratim b'negeh dinim of Ori Miklat. Now, in Perek Tes and in Perek Yud, the Rambam is going to discuss the dinim of Egla Rufa. That if you find someone, a Haruk, someone that was killed, and you find him outside a city, and the question is, who killed him? You don't know who killed him. So the din is, you have to measure from the Haruk, from the corpse, until the cities around it, and then you establish which is the closest city, and that city has to bring an Egla Rufa. That's what we'll learn by Hamshachir. Perek Chi. Harug shenimtza neufel la'aretz v'loinoida mihiko. You have a harug, someone that was killed, and he's found on the floor, as on the ground, and we don't know who killed him. So the din is manichanesi b'kemi. First, you leave him where he is, because you don't bury him yet. And v'yotzim chamisha skenim mibez nagodel b'shalayim shnema v'yotzuz keinecha v'sheftecha. So from the words Keinecha, we learn now that it's two. When Sheftecha is another two, and Ein Bezin Shakel, so therefore there's five. And since it says Keinecha v'Sheftecha, we learn now that we're talking about that you bring the Skenim and the Sheftim from the Bezin HaGodel. And then Umoidedin Mimenu El Ha'arim Shesvive Sachol. You have to measure from the Harug until the cities around the cities, the radius around this Harug, to the cities which are around the Chol. Now, afilu nimtza b'tzad irzu, in other words, it's found very close to a particular city. Shadavar yadua bevadai shehi akreva. That's pretty clear. It's not pretty clear. It's very clear that this is the closest city. You don't have to measure, but nevertheless, mitzvah limded. There's a mitzvah to measure to all the neighboring cities, and then to establish that this is the closest city. And the reason for it is brought down is because through that it'll be nisparsim, this Indian, that there was a harug, and that they're going to bring an egla rufa, and that'll help to find the hoirig, the person, the actual murderer, the ritzech. The Rebbe brings this also, this time that's brought down as Svarim in Likutei Sichos. I'll call upon him, so the din is that Nachama you find on harug, which is neufel la'aretz. That's neufel la'aretz. He's on the ground, and we don't know who he was killed, and we don't know who killed him. So the din is you leave him where he is. 5 people of the Bezin HaGodel go out, and they measure from the Haruk till the neighboring cities. And the Maggid Mishnah brings from the Sifri that you have to measure taka from the Haruk to the neighboring cities, not from the neighboring cities to the Haruk. In other words, the way of the measuring is you start the measuring process from the Haruk to the cities around the Haruk. Halacha Beis. Achar shemedidin v'neida hira kreva. Once it was measured, these people, the 5 members of the Bezin HaGodel measured from the Harug until the cities, and it was established which is the closest city. So then Kavernus and Neregbim came. Then you kavered the Neregbim came, like the regular din that a mes mitzvah you always kaver bim came. And then the Choizen Zikr Yishlayim came. So the members of the Bezin HaGodel already did what they were supposed to do. They established which is the closest city. So now they're Choizen Zikr Yishlayim came. Now, Ubezdin Shal Eishoir, the Bezdin of that city, which was established that was the closest city, is Mevian Eglas Boka. They have to bring a calf, and that calf is Mishal Anshe Eishoir, that belongs to the people of that city, the city that was the closest city to the Harug. Umerid Noise El Nachal Shesheitev Bechoska. They bring it down to a river, to a flowing stream of water, which is flowing very strong. V'zeu eson ha'omer b'teira. The pasuk says nachal eson. So the Rambam's taich nachal eson means a nachal which is flowing, a very strong flow of water. That's taich nachal eson. V'zeu eson ha'omer b'teira. Now Rashi taiches eson, and Bemis Nigmar says choizek chazaka, and he learns that it means that it's hard earth, that it's nachal which has hard earth. That's what nachal eson means. It doesn't mean that there's flowing water over there. It means it's like a valley, a place over there which is a valley, and that valley has hard earth. That's the Nachal Eson. Mashenka the Rambam learns that Nachal Eson means a place that there is a strong flow of water. Now, Halacha Gimel. ve'erfen oisa sham bekufis me'achareh. And over there, you go ahead and you decapitate this egla, this calf, from the back of it, with a kupitz. A kupitz is something which we had before, something a katzev uses. In other words, he brings over here from Pirush Mishnayos and Seita, means it's a large and wide knife, which a butcher would use. That's a kufitz, which is something to chop meat. So you go ahead and you decapitate this egla, this calf, with a kufitz from the back. Then the bezdin of that city goes ahead, even if they were 100, kulam roichtzin es yodeim sham b'mkei marifasa, in the place where this arifa took place. So they go ahead and they wash their hands. And be'emrim sham b'teicha nachal, they go in the nachal, they stand over there in the nachal, and they say b'loshon hakedesh, yodeinu lishavchu es hadom hazeh ve'einenu leiro. That knows our hands didn't spill this blood, and we'll soon see what does it mean our hands didn't spill this blood. Obviously, they're not the ones that killed him. That's what the Gemara says. That the Zikna Yair killed this person. Kalema, when it says Yodenu lishavchu es adam hazeh, it means shalibo liyodenu hanereg hazeh. In other words, we didn't see this nerag upatarnu b'lei mezenis, and we sent him away without food. Or v'lei rinir, we didn't see him upatarnu b'lei levoya, and we sent him away without being escorted. Because when a person is sent away without being escorted, so then the Rotzeach is not really afraid of killing him because nobody's really cares about him. So I'll call upon him. We didn't send him away without food. We didn't send him away without an escort. They say the words Kaper la'amchi Yisrael Shabadisa Hashem, the whole pasuk, and then v'hilchen lehem. V'Hakadosh Baruch Hu mechaper l'adam shnemer v'nikaper lehem adam. So the Rambam is saying the whole seder of what happens. What happens is that when you find this corpse that was killed and he's al ha'adam, like the Rambam will say pratim over there, how exactly you found him. So then you have to bring from the Anshe Sanhedrin, 5 people of the Anshe Sanhedrin, to measure from the corpse until the neighboring to the cities around this corpse, and they have to establish what is the closest city. Then the bezdin of that city goes ahead and takes a calf, which was bought by the city, by the people of the city. The people of the city supply this calf. They bring it down to this Nachal Eson, which the Ram learns is a flowing water that's flowing very strong, a stream of water which is flowing very strong. Over there, they decapitate this calf from the back with a kupitz, and then they go ahead and all the Ziknei Ha'ir go ahead and wash their hands in this Nachal, which the place where they made this harifa, where they did this act of being orphanus ha'egla b'nachal, and then they say Yodeinu l'shavchu es adam hazeh ve'einenu l'iro, which means that we didn't send them away without mezenis, and we didn't send them away without levoya, and then the kohanim which are there say that kaper l'amchi Yisrael, and that's it. And through that it becomes the Eibishter is mechaper on this dam, on this spilled blood. Halacha dalet. When they measure, they have to go measure from the cholol to the cities around this cholol. Is medaktik and b'midah, they're very careful about the measurement. Ve'ein mekadrin bo, and there's no Indian of being mekader in the midah. Now we learned b'negeh the Tchum Shabbos. When we're learning about Tchum Shabbos over there at Perek Chavches in Hilchos Shabbos, they were discussing mekadrin baharim. There was a way of how you measure. Now, you have a mountain, you want to establish how far is the Tchum Shabbos, so there would be a measuring. You would measure from 2 people would be measuring. One would hold the string to his chest, and the other one would hold it to his feet, and that's how. And they would ascend the mountain, and that's how they would measure this mountain. So that's it's not such a meduyik way of measuring. So over here he's saying medaktik b'midah. Over here there's a stronger diktuk in the midah that they have to measure exact, and you can't go ahead and be mekadrim like you do in Hilchos Shabbos. Like in Hilchos Shabbos was also ganz meduyik. They were being medayik, but vice versa, you have to take a much more stronger diak. In other words, that would be, let's say, to have a long string that's going across. In other words, it wouldn't be like keep measuring tzibislach vice when you're going above. You're ascending the mountain, you're ascending the slope. Somehow or another, you have to figure out how to make a measurement that it should be measurement with a large rope, and that's how the measurement will be more an exact measurement. I'll call upon him. That's this. Then you have to measure you have to make this measurement. You have to be medaktik b'midah. Being medaktik b'midah, Ram says ein mekadrin ba. The only mekadrin we had this din of mekadrin b'harim. So Vai says this mekadrin ba wouldn't work. And then the ein moededin el leir sheyesh ba bezin shelesim u'shleisha. The only those potential cities that could be the city that has to bring the Egla Rufa is only a city which has a bezin shelesim u'shleisha, which is a bezin which could kill people. That could be done din in the nefashis. And also the emeded din Yerushalayim, even though Yerushalayim has this bedin, but there's another din you don't measure towards Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim ein mevin egla arufa lefi shel nischalka l'shvatim, and v'namar bo adom asher Hashem alikecha neisen l'chol rishta. So we're only talking about those cities which Hashem alikecha neisen l'chol nachal rishta. Only those cities are eligible, are shayches, or potentially to have the chiv of egla arufa. So again, if you find this harug, and this harug, you have to find out all the cities around the harug, and to find out what is the closest city which is around this harug. So if the only cities that are, so to speak, potentially shaykhs to be the one that's the closest to the harug and have to bring a egla rufa, it has to be a city which has a bezin shel chav gimel, and it also can't be a city of Yerushalayim, and therefore halacha so nimtza karvi Yerushalayim. So let's say the closest city happens to be Yerushalayim, or the closest city happens to be a city which Ein Ba Bezdin is Manichanes. So we don't reckon with that city. We make as if there's no such a city. And then we measure to the other cities which are close to it. And therefore, those cities that are close to it, we find out the closest of those other cities which are closest. So if you have, let's say, the city that doesn't have a Bezin Shel Chav Gimel is really the closest. But then you have other cities which are not as close, so you have to look from the other cities, which is the closest of the other cities, and that's the closest of those other cities, is the city which has to bring a Egla Rufa, even though Be'emes there's a closest city. There's Be'emes there's a closest city, or there's Yerushalayim, which is even closest. But since they're not, so to speak, eligible, there's no possibility for them to bring the Egla Rufa, so the one that brings the Egla Rufa is the closest eligible city to bring an Egla Rufa. That's this din. Nimtza samach l'svar eli'ir sheyesh b'goyim, if it was close to this border between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz, or is close to a city which had goyim, is ein moeded in kolika, you don't measure at all. Sharei b'cheska shargu goyim. The Rambam brings that this din is even l'moshel if you have a closer city. You have a city which has Yidden, which is the closest city. And Lepel, there's another city which is not as close, but it's a city that has goyim. Or you have the border, which is also not as close as this city, which has Yidden, but there is a border not so far, that's between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. So again, since there's this city which has Goyim, or this border, so therefore, even though it's not as close as this closest city, but you don't start measuring to find out what the closest city is, because since over here there's something bitoila, which is the Goyim which are across the border, or the Goyim which are in that particular city, so even though there are closest cities, you don't measure it. So that's this din. Normally you measure to find out the closest city, and that closest city has to bring Egla Rufa. If the closest city is a city which doesn't have a Bezin Shel Chav Gimel, or the closest city is Yerushalayim, so then you find out the closest city other than that closest city. And those you go for another city. You find out what's the closest city other than that city, even though that city is really the closest, but that doesn't count, and therefore you go and look for the closest city other than that city. If there is a city which has Goyim, or it's close to the Svar, which is between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz, so even though there is the closest city of Yidden, but nevertheless, since there's this city which is also in close proximity, and Al Derazeh there's the Svar, so then we don't go ahead and stop measuring, because we assume either the Goyim across the border did it, or the city Sheyesh B'Goyim. Now it doesn't really say what's called Samach, Nimtza Samach L'Svar, Eliyah Sheyesh B'Goyim. In other words, once you are saying that even if there's a closest city, but if it's also close to the Svar, or close to the other city, so you don't have to start measuring, you have to establish what's considered close. It's not so clear what close means. Halacha Vov. Eino ir akreva mivio, ela bizman sheminyan harev shebo, keminyan ho'ir harchek mimeno. So in other words, if you have two cities, and one is closer and one is not as close, so then we say that the closer one is the one that has to bring. That's only when the one that's not as close is the same amount as the one that's close. So Mela, we say that this is Karev, so we assume it comes from a Karev. But Lepel, if there's more people in the city which is further, as opposed to the city which is closer, so then that's the Shaila in the Gemara, do we go Basar Rev or do we go Basar Karev? So the halach is we go Basar Rev. So since there's more people in the further city, so the people of the further city are the ones that have to bring the Egla Rufa, and not the people in the closest city. Nachamol. Eno ira kreva mivia ele bezman sheminyan harev sheba kiminyan ha'ir harcheka mimanu. So in other words, the people that are in that city are the same amount like the people in the other city. There were more people in the more distant city than the closer city. So then, therefore we go according to the city which has the more people, and the ones that are merubim, they are the ones that bring the egla. So that's this din. So if you have a city which is, let's say, 1,000 amas away, and you have another city which is 1,500 amas away, so if they're both the same amount, so then we go basa the one that's 1,000 amas away. But if the one that has 1,500 amas has more people than the one that has 1,000 amas, so the one that has 1,500 people, even though he's further, but nevertheless he's the one that brings Egla Ruf. Halacha Zayin. Aval Pisha, and that's the Yisod Advarim, is Aval Pisha Hilchen Achar Reiv Menatera, and also the Hilchen Achar Akarev, which is we learn out Reiv Menatera, and also we learn out Karev, which is in the Parsha of Egla Rufa. Nevertheless, the Maskonas Advarim is that a Harev Adif, the bitter of Reiv, is a stronger bitter than the bitter of Karev, so therefore you go Basar, the city that has a greater population, and not the city which is closer. Halacha ches, nimtzo hanerag mechuven min shtei hayoris, and va'anshizu ka'anshizu b'shava. In other words, you have a person that's exactly in between two cities, and those two cities have the exact amount of people, so there's no roiv and there's no karev. They're both equally karev, and they're both equally roiv. So what do? So the Maisa says we really don't accept that they're mamish equal. In other words, even though when you're measuring it, they seem to be equal, but we have the EF shel tzamtzum, we assume that there must be that one is closer than the other. It's just that we're not being able to be tzamtzum to adjust and to find that fine point of how one is closer to the other. But we assume that one is definitely closer than the other. They're not really the same the same distance. And therefore, we since we don't know which is closer or which is further, because when we measure it, they seem to be exactly the same. So therefore, you have to do something in a way. You make a tanai in a way that manav shach, the one that's taka closer, it should be his egla rufa. That's this cheshbon that we make over here. Nachamol nimtzo hanerag mechuven mishtei ayoris and va'anshizu ka'anshizu b'shava. So now there's a suffix. Who's the one that really has to bring the egla? It's for sure not both. Is the din is yaviu egla achas b'shutfus. They should bring egla together, and v'yasnu v'yoimru, they should make a tanai. They say as if this city is really the closer one, even though we measured, they both seem to be the same. But in reality, this one is the closer one, is Harehi Shalahem, so this Egla belongs to them. So in other words, the people of the other city are being makna their chelik to the people in the city, which is really the closer one. And they give away their chelik matana. And if the other city is really the krevim, is Harehi Shalahem, so this Egla is really theirs. And the other cities, the ones that's giving away matana, so in other words, it's really it's impossible that really they should be exactly the same. It's impossible that they're both the same. So we nemon that's for sure one of them is closer than the other. It's just that we can't figure out which one is closer because they're so close to each other, and therefore we'll make this tonight that whoever klapishmaya or galia, which one is closer, so whoever is the closer one, he is the one that's actually bringing the egla ruf. Now mehechon meided, when you want to measure a person, you want to measure how far is this person from this city, how far is he from the other city, what part of the body do you start measuring from? Michotmei, you measure from his nose. So from the nose, that's where you start measuring. It could be a metzias if it's very close. It could be a metzias of that. If you measure from the feet, so it would be closer to this city. If you measure to the nose, it'll be closer to another city. So you say, where do you measure from? You measure from the nose. Now, nimtza gufi b'mokim echad v'reishi b'mokim acher is melichin haguf etzel hareish. You bring the body, the rest of the body, to the head. If they were the head and the body were separated. So you bring the body to the head, and v'kevon esibim kemim, you bury him kemim. That's the din hilchos kfura. In other words, the din of medida, he says you made them miachoitim. So that has nothing to do with the fact that you bring the body to the head. But that's one din. That's the din is mehechon made it, and you made it from the chetim. Now we're saying another din, that if the body and the head was separated, so you bring the body to the head, and the cave mason came in. That's the lesson. Basar reisha gufa azul. That's the basar reisha gufa azul. The gufa goes to the reish. The chen kol mes mitzvah is always malichin gufa etzel reisha, and the nikber b'm keme, you bring the guf to the reish, and that's where you bury him. Halacha yud. Nimtzu mesim rabim zebis hazeh. There's more than one mess. There's mesim rabim, one next to each other, and each one be'etzem is mechayev and egla rufa. So there's a meidin michot mishkol echad ve'echad. You measure from the nose of each one. If the same city was closer to all of them, so then it's mevia and egla achas al kulim. You don't have to bring an egla for each mess. You bring one egla for all of them. Masha'inkin, if let's say there's one mess is closer to one city and the other mess is closer to another city, so then it's pasha that this city brings for its mess and the other city brings for its mess. Now nimtza zeh al gav zeh, if they're found one on top of each other, so if they're found one on top of each other, we'll learn that it has to be something which is gully. In other words, in order to have a din of this mess, which is mechayiv and egla rufa, it has to be a mess which is begoli on the ground. If it would be tomun, so then it wouldn't be mechayiv egla rufa. So if you have one mess on top of another mess, so the mess on the bottom has a din of tomun. So therefore, you only rechenzach with the top mess, not with the bottom mess. That's this din. Nimtza ze al gav ze is meilidin min ha'elyin k'mei shehi munochen. You bring you measure from the top as they're lying, as the top is lying, and that's how you measure from his nose. You don't measure from the bottom because the bottom is called tomun. Halacha Yud Aleph. Namar, the pasuk says, we started over the Rambam started over the pasuk, the perik harug shenimtza neifel la'aretz v'leinoida mihiko. So now the Rambam is going to go through more of the pratim of this harug that was nimtza neifel la'aretz v'leinoida mihiko. So the pasuk says that ki motzi chol ba'adama neifel ba'aretz neifel basoda leinoida mihiko. That's the lashon pasuk. Nachamol ki motzi chol ba'adama neifel basoda leinoida mihiko. So we learn out of say namar ki motzi cholol. The pasuk says cholol. So chol means someone that was injured with a knife, with a weapon. That was injured with a weapon. So the pasuk says chalal lecherev. He was injured with a weapon. So cholol lechonuk. It doesn't mean he was choked. It means he was injured with a weapon, with a knife, with a sword. That's a cholol. And then it says v'lei mefarfer. A person mefarfer means, in other words, he's still alive. He's still in other words, he's not completely. He didn't die yet. He's dying. He's about to die, but you found him before he died, actually. So that wouldn't also be a chol. A chol means someone that already died. She'ein ze nikra chol. Chol means someone that's not a chonuk. That's number one, and also not someone that's a mefarfer. That he's still in the throes of death. He's in the middle of the throes of death. He's dying, but he didn't die yet. Then it says ba'adoma. You found him ba'adoma. Ba'adoma means leit tomen bagal. He's not hidden in some pile of stones or earth. He's ba'adoma. He's open on the earth. And neufel, what does it mean? Neufel, he fell. Neufel, it says neufel basoda. Neufel leitole ba'ilon. He's not hanging on a tree. In other words, he's not hanging on a tree. He's neufel. He's on the ground. And basoda, the pasuk says neufel basoda, which means leit sov pnei hamayim. He's not floating on the water. And le'neida mihiko, we don't know who killed him. Hoyim neida, but if we do know, is le'hoyo erfim, the whole din of egla rufa wouldn't apply. The whole din of egla rufa is if no one knows who killed him. Is again, the pasuk says ki motzi cholol ba'adama neifel basoda le'neida mihiko. So we learn out cholol. It has to be a cholol, and not a chonuk, and also not a mefarfer, not someone that's still in the throes of death. And then it says ba'adama, it has to be on the earth. Li tomim begali is not covered up in some type of a mound of stones or earth. And neifel means that he's not hanging on a tree. And basoda means he's not on the water, he's not floating on the water. And lineida miiko means nobody knows who killed him. Halacha yud beis. Afilu roa ahirig eidachad. If there's one person that saw who killed him, Afilo eved the isha apostle edus ba'avera is also lehoya orphan. The din of egla rufa wouldn't apply if there's someone, even someone that's not a kosher edus, only a neidachod, and even a neidachod which is not a kosher edus, also there wouldn't be a rifa. It has to be something that he was killed without anyone seeing, or we don't know of anyone that actually saw him being killed. And then we assume that someone really saw this person being killed. There's someone out there that saw him being killed. Is batla egla rufa, the whole musik of egla rufa became batul because over there was bepashtos, people saw him being killed. Halacha yud gimel. So again, so we have a person that was found. He was found, he was a mess. And now the pashtus advarim is we don't know, nobody knows who killed him. And now comes along an eidachod and he says, Re'isi sahirik, I saw the person kill him. And the eidachod the krisha, and then there's another eidachod. V'amr le'lei re'isa, you didn't see him kill him. In other words, you were with me, whatever. You couldn't have seen him being killed. So the din is hoyo erfim, because since we, again, an eidachod that would say, I saw it, and there would be no one be machkeshit, so that would be cause that you not to be erfit. There's an eidachod seeing it would cause not to have an egla rufa. But if you have one person claiming he saw it and the other person contradicting him and saying he didn't see it, so we don't really believe him that he saw it. So as far as we're concerned, there's no aid that says he saw it, because the aid that claims he saw it was contradicted by the other aid. So therefore, hayu erfim. So then it becomes a regular din of an egla rufa. Becomes a regular din of an egla rufa when we have no one that saw it. So erfim. But medvar mamurim that we say that since he contradicted him, so it's as if we have no aid that saw him. They came together, one said yeah, one said not. So therefore we don't rechazach with the one that said yes, it's as if he never came, and immediately you make a regular, you erfenes egla. Avalim omer echad ani orisius erik. He came along and he said, I ani orisius erik. And at that point in time we accepted what he said, and therefore there's no din of egla rufa. Is harezek nema kishnaim liinzeh, as far as the din of egla rufa is concerned, he's nema kishnaim that he saw this person being killed, and there's no chiyuv of egla rufa. Now vimbo achar kach idechod vekrishe va'amar leirisa. Now the other person comes along and it says leirisa is a mashgichen al divrei achre. We don't listen to the second person, and therefore we still accept what the first person said, the roisi esaherik, and therefore ve'ein erfim, because when we accept the one that said Re'isi esaherik, so ein erfim. That's the din l'chatchila. If one, so again, if two people came, one said yeah, one said not, so we are erfim because we don't accept the one that said he saw it. Mashenkin, if one person said yeah, and then we accepted what he said, and then another person comes along and as makrish the first person, so we still accept what the first person said, and since we accept what the first person said that he saw the hoirig, so therefore is ein erfim. Halacha yudalid. Bo shnayim achar shehei edechad. So we learned before that if a edechad came along, and then another edechad came along, an edechad came along and said Re'isi sahirik, and then we accepted what he said, and then another edechad came along and was makrish. So if the other edechad came together with the first edechad, so then we consider it as if there was no aid that saw the hirig, and memela is erfin. Mashenkin, the first edechad came along and said Re'isi sahirik, and then we accepted what he said, and now another eidachad comes along and is makrish the first eidachad. So since the first eidachad was an eidachad kosher, so therefore dvarav shalechad is b'mokim shnayim, and therefore we accept what he said, and therefore ein orfim. That was the din we learned. Now halacha yudalad bo shnayim achar shehir dechad. If a eidachad came after shehir dechad, so taka we don't accept the second echad against the first echad, because the first echad has a din kishnayim. Masha'inkin, if two people came achar shehei edechad, v'hikrishu ve'omru le'leiro iso, so now they're the two edim. So einachnami, even though the edechad was already accepted, like two edim, but they're also two edim. So memela harein kishnei idiyas hamakrisha zu izu ve'erfin, because now there's also two edim. So there's two edis being makrish, the first aid which has a din of two edis, and memela's edim hamakrisha zu izu is sekila. We have no edis to say that re'isi and therefore erfin. Now it's a chiddush, because the pashtus you would say that even though an eidechad has a din kishnayim, that's only as a din kishnayim legabi if a eidechad comes to be makrishim. But if two edim come along and be makrishim, so then we believe the second two edim against the first echad. It's not like shnei idiyas hamakrisha zu azu. L'chure and other dinim where we say that eidechad is naman kishnayim, That din is only legabi. If Eid Echad comes along and is makrishim later, so we don't accept the second Eid Echad because the first Eid Echad had a din kishnayim. But if two Eidim come along and they're being makrish the first Eid Echad, so bepashtus you accept the second Eidus and you don't accept the first Eidus. Here the Rambam is saying that since the first Eid had a din kishnayim, and now when you have another two Eidim which are being makrish that first Eid Echad, that has a din kishnei idis hamakishazu is over erfen. So remember, there's an arichos. The Rambam brings an arichos to be masber why over here it has a din of kishnei idis hamakishazu. But either way, lepel. Once we establish that we don't accept the first Eid Echad, whether we completely don't accept him or we only don't accept him because kishnei idis hamakishazu is so mele comes the din that erfen. Halacha vayte isha imeres or isi saherik the isha acheres makishas esa veimeres leirois. So over there, hoyo erfin, ben shabo shteim ka'achas, ben shabo zachar zeh. This din, that Eid Echad is naman kishnayim, and therefore, once the Eid Echad came, so later on, when the Eid Echad, another Eid Echad is going to come, he's not going to be able to be makrish the first Eid Echad, because he was already accepted kishnayim. That's only when the first Eid Echad was a kosher leidus. Masha'inkin, when you had the first Eid Echad was a isha. And then later on, another Isha comes and is makrish, the Isha that said Re'isi. So even though when the Isha says Re'isi, we accept what she says, and therefore an orphan. But once another Isha comes along and is makrish that Isha, even if that Isha comes along later, so that we don't say that the first Isha is Neman because it accepted Kishnaim. That din doesn't apply to a Isha. That's this din again. Isha imeres re'isi sahirik. And then the Isha acheres makreshes esa. Ve'imeres le're'is is hoyo erfin. You are erfin, you don't accept what the first Isha said. And that din is bein shabo shteim ka'achas, which for sure it's a Eid Echad and a Eid Echad, so you don't accept what one Eid said. And bein shabo zachar zu, even if they came one after the other. Now, shnayim emrim re'inu ve'echadem le're'isem. So then ein erfim, because we believe the shnayim, we don't believe the one against the two. So therefore, since shnayim emrim re'inu, and one is saying le're'isem, is ein erfim. Fakert echadem re'isi. So if it's a two against one, we reckon zech with the two. And lepel, if the maskana is that re'inu, so then it's ein erfen. The maskana is le're'isem, so it's erfen. Now halacha tezva b'medvar mamurim. This is going on the end of this halacha of the shnayim and echad. B'medvar mamurim kshohi shloshtem ksherim ipsulim. So you have two ksherim and one kosher, or you have two psulim and one puzzle. If you have one Eid Echad which is a kosher, and he says Re'isi Aherik, so then ein erfim, because we reckon zach with the Eid Echad that said Re'isi, and the two Noshim and Psulim don't have the ability to be makrish the Eid Echad which said Re'isi. Now this din that we're saying that the two Noshim don't have a care to be makrish the Eid Echad which said Re'isa, that's bepashtus only if the Eid Echad came first, and then the other two Noshim came later. So first the Eid Echad came, and then the two Noshim came afterwards. So then we say, just like we said before, that an Eid Echad can be makrish the first Eid Echad, because the first Eid Echad has a din kishnayim. So al derech zeh, the Noshim can't be makrish that first Eid Echad because he has a din kishnayim, even though they're two, but they don't have such a strength. Masha'inkin in a case where you have an Eid Echad coming saying Re'isi, and then you have at the same time two Noshim Psulim that are saying Lo Re'isa. In such a case, the question is, in such a case, will you also believe the Eid Echad? So the Rambam brings, and L'churat Mefuris and Gemara later in the Rambam in Hilchos Seita, Benegeh, the dinim also over there, that there's a din of an Eid Echad saw. So the question is, do you reckon zech with the Eid Echad? So over there, L'churat, the din is clear that B'shas Maisa, the two Noshim could be makrish the Eid Echad. There's this din that two Noshim can be makrish the Eid Echad means later. Even though in the Rambam it doesn't say clearly. It says, Im Omer Eid Echad Re'isi Aherik, Ushtei Noshim Mishnei Psulim, Im Le Re'isa Ein Erfim, but that's only if the Shtei Noshim are coming after the Eid Echad came. Masha'in came, if they came B'shas Maisa, so then the din wouldn't be like that. Halacha Tezayin, Shtei Noshim, Shtei Psulim, Eimrim Re'inu Aherik, and Ve'eid Echad Makhisham, Ve'eima Le Re'isam. So then is Erfim. And the reason for it is because Lepeil, the Eid Echad is makrish the Shtei Noshim. The Shtei Noshim knows the Shtei Noshim. The Eid Echad is makrish the Shtei Noshim. Even though the Shtei Noshim, and this is an Eid Echad, but the strength of the Eid Echad has the strength to be makish the shtei noshim, shafilu mea noshim, a mea psulim, and ve'ed echad makish is kulam, is harei ki ish echad ve'ed echad. It has a din like an eid echad and eid echad, and since it has a din like an eid echad, so eid echad can be makish all the noshim. So just like the Rambam is saying it has a din like a eid echad and eid echad, so the chura hu adin that the noshim can be makish the ish. In other words, it works both ways. In other words, the ish, if you have the noshim, 100 noshim that are saying re'inu, and you have one aid that is saying le're'is, re'isem, so the din is that erfim. Why? Because we don't accept the noshim that said that re'isem. So al there is a fakert. If you have a ish echad that's saying re'isi, and then you have two noshim that are saying le're'isem, so you'll reckon it with the two noshim will be an eid echad and eid echad, just like an eid echad that came together, so you could be makish. Masha'inkin, if the two noshim come later, so then you can't be makish. So notice, hareilu ki ish echad ve'eid echad, it's like one aid against one aid, and what's done by one aid and one aid? So b'shas ma'isa you could be makish, and not b'shas ma'isa you can't be makish. So we go back to halacha tezvav, and when the halacha tezvav, eid echad re'isi ayirik, shtei noshim v'shnei psulim eimrim lei re'isa. So in erfim only if they come later, Mashenka, if they come b'shas ma'isa, so then it has a din like an eid echad and eid echad came together, which we learned earlier, and then they could be makish. Halacha Yud Zayin. Shalish noshim ishleisha psulim emrim re'inu ahirik. They say re'inu, and then the arba noshim arba psulim emrim leirisem is erfim. So always erfim. Over there you always go basa the rave. When you have psulim, you reckon up with the rave. Zeh aklal b'psulim. Halech acher reva minyan b'chol makom. You always reckon with the rave. In other words, there's no din of who came earlier, who came later. The issue is who is the rave. So if there's more people saying re'inu as opposed to the people that are saying leiri yisem, so then we assume re'inu and therefore ein erfim. If there's more people saying leiri yisem to the amount of people that are saying re'isem, so then is erfim. Then is erfim.